a method of critical analysis of philosophical and literary language which emphasizes the internal workings of language and conceptual systems, the relational quality of meaning, and the assumptions implicit in forms of expression. That is the definition of deconstruction. Some people use deconstruction as a synonym for breakdown or analysis. If you want to add words to your vocabulary, that's cool. That's what the definition sounds like anyway, just with a lot of unnecessary words. But then there are people that use deconstruction as a high-level writing technique. I don't know where it started, but TV Tropes is definitely one of the major promoters of this concept. According to the site, quote, "When applied to tropes or other aspects of fiction, deconstruction means to take apart a trope in a way that exposes its inherent contradictions, often by exploring the difference between how the trope appears in this one work and how it compares to other relevant tropes or ideas both in fiction and real life." End quote. In simple terms, it's asking how would this trope play out in real life. It usually amounts to subverting a bunch of tropes and making them darker and pessimistic. I just noticed this. But none of the deconstructed tropes come out on the other end, equally positive or more positive. It always becomes more negative. It's as if writers of this page are pessimists who think that real life is no peaks and all valleys, no Cobra Kai. Interesting. I don't know where they got this definition from, but for some reason, there are groups of people who view genre deconstruction as a mark of high quality writing. It's not. Subverting tropes for the sake of subverting tropes is silly. A lot of tropes exist because they work, either for the author or the audience. Playing the trope straight usually leads to a satisfying payoff. So sometimes, when an author subverts a trope, they are just robbing the audience of a satisfying payoff to be different. If the subversion doesn't have some kind of connection to the themes of the story, then it's just a shallow attempt at standing out. Playing it straight would be the guy gets the girl, subversion would be the guy doesn't get the girl. Let's tie this back to battle manga. My main attraction will be Hunter x Hunter, but there'll be a special guest appearance at the end. Hunter x Hunter is the main battle manga praised as being a deconstruction, but here's my question. How can a story be a genre deconstruction, while also being influential in the genre's tropes? If a story is known for turning the genre's tropes on its head, how can it also be a strong influence of the most played straight stories of the genre? I don't think it can. You can't have it both ways. Let's examine that. Deconstructor fleet is a term given to stories that do enough deconstruction to have their own page. Hunter x Hunter has a page. I will look at the most interesting tropes and see how useless they are or how common they are. This is what the writer of this page said. Quote, "Hunter x Hunter is both a tribute and examination of shonen battle manga. Many of the arc structures, character archetypes, and tropes common to shonen manga are invoked and twisted into darker, more grounded interpretations. The series uses these deconstructed tropes to make a point about shonen manga. A world where shonen manga cliches are commonplace is a world that is much more dangerous, cruel, and violent than our own." Oh really? Let's get into it. Stock battle hero. I mostly agree with this analysis here. My issue is that this isn't putting a trope in a realistic setting. Gon's morality is weird, while traditional battle heroes have a more realistic Boy Scout morality. They say Gon's potential is treated like an abnormality. Naruto, Bleach, MHA, and Demon Slayer all do the same thing. Even Yu Yu Hakusho, I believe. Killua has a subverted, defusing the Tyke Bomb arc, but Naruto does this with Haku too. More importantly, this isn't even a common trope in battle manga. The site itself barely has examples. They name a lot more details about his arc, but that's not subverting the trope. That's just the writer adding more details. The trope is that a person who was trained to be a weapon becomes human, thus defused. Leorio wants to become a hunter for money, so does Ochako. The option of battle heroes making money for their job was arguably introduced by Hunter x Hunter, so how can it be a deconstruction? DBZ, Yu Yu Hakusho, JoJo, and Kenshin characters weren't making money for being heroes. After Hunter x Hunter, Naruto, Fairy Tail, MHA, BC, and CSM started getting paid. Hisoka being a blood knight is off-putting to his allies. That's about it. Meruem is a deconstruction of the might makes right trope because he has a character arc where he moves away from that. So does that mean every villain who arcs out of their evil ways is a deconstruction? Vegeta did that way back in Dragon Ball. Aoshi Shinomori did it in Kenshin. Hiei did it in Hakusho. The Hunter exam is a deconstruction of a contest arc because it shows what would happen if there was a contest with regular humans and superhumans. But Dragon Ball, the trope codifier of tournaments, already did that. The people with ki and superpowers demolished the normies. So if the OG is doing that, what is being deconstructed? Furthermore, how many arcs have contests where everyone isn't superpowered? Are we talking about just manga here or all mediums? It should just be about battle manga, like the first paragraph said. The contestants winning on a technicality is a subversion, the one that results in a less satisfying story due to the lack of payoffs I mentioned before. I agree with the Zoldyck Rescue subversion, and like I said in the intro, the subversion comes at the cost of a satisfying payoff. For Heaven's Arena, they say a whole bunch of uneducated nonsense. Whoever wrote this acted like having a sensei in a training arc was uncommon, acted like it was a poor place to train, and acted like allies being pitted against each other in a training arc was common. That's for tournaments, not training. The heroes not making it to the top of Heaven's Arena was a subversion, but only a subversion of the expectations it created, not a subversion of a genre trope. Something like Heaven's Arena does not exist in other battle manga. For York Noon, the writer acts like villain groups, having a power gap over small fries is uncommon. Most battle heroes fight tooth and nail to defeat their respective villain groups anyway. The troop caring for their own was definitely different for the time, because back in the day, villains would kill their own allies if they became useless. Look at Dragon Ball, Yu Yu Hakusho, and Kenshin. I won't even address Greed Island, because the writer made up a concept of a deadly game. What other battle manga has this deadly game arc? Last arc is Chimera Ant arc. An enemy arc isn't a thing, but I'll go with it. The writer tries to split hairs, but at the end of the day, the heroes still fight all of the villains. A plan going wrong isn't a genre subversion. Gon not fighting Meruem is actually a subversion. From Dragon Ball to here, the protagonist has almost always fought the big bad, either because they were the strongest hero, or because their sensei was occupied, or they surpassed their sensei. Kenshin was the first to even get close to this, because the sensei showed up to fight in an arc, but the sensei fought someone else, and Kenshin fought Shishio. Hunter probably started this, then others like Naruto, Hiro, Clover, and more followed suit. Meruem winning the final battle and resolving the plot through a character arc is definitely a subversion. One thing I'd like to add is that the theme of the Chimera Ant arc is the most sunshine and rainbows theme possible. It's just thrusted into the middle of the darkest arc of the story, making the theme shine even more brightly. This goes against the narrative that Hunter x Hunter is all darkness and despair, as the writers of this page would have you believe. Now, we get into shonen demographic tropes, which should be tied to battle genre tropes. Gon's evil power-up is the first one. Dragon Ball had Grade 8, Yu Yu had Demon Form, Kenshin had Batosai. All of these evil next tier power-ups existed, so how can Gon's be a subversion? Simply making a more detailed version of Ki somehow counts as a deconstruction of Ki. I don't get it. So does that mean Spirit Energy from Yu Yu Hakusho and Stands from JoJo were deconstructions of Ki because they were more complex? This article also said that Nen users conserved their powers while other stories spammed them. Again, simply reading or skimming OG Dragon Ball would fix that misunderstanding. Back then, the only Ki attack Goku had was Kamehameha, which he did not spam. Ki Blast can be, and were spammed in DBZ, but not in DB. Additionally, the main characters got Nen late. That should have been the subversion, because once they got it, they spammed it. Nen is difficult to obtain, well so are Spirit Energy and Stands, which came before Hunter. So why is this a deconstruction if it had already been normal in the genre? Powers being tied to personality isn't a deconstruction, it's just adding layers, which JoJo arguably did first, and established that as a trend, as seen in Yu Yu Hakusho, Hunter x Hunter, One Piece, Naruto, Bleach, and so on. Jing being a deadbeat is a subversion to the disappeared dad because most dads are just dead. He's alive but chooses to be out of his son's life. Last three. First is about NGL, which has nothing to do with battle genre tropes. I don't get the Kurapika one if it's talking about the manga, because I didn't read it. If it's talking about the anime, what wrong people did he piss off? On top of all of that, depending on how you define a revenge story, I don't think they're common. If King Piccolo, Pain's Assault, and Phantom Lord count as revenge, then they're common. If only Sasuke and Hyanglei's arcs count as revenge, then they aren't that common. Finally, they talk about how evil has loved ones is subverted, but like I said before, this wasn't really a trope before Hunter. So is deconstructing its subversion? The site can be up its own ass sometimes. The logic doesn't even make sense. Just because I care about certain people doesn't mean I can't kill other people for fun. It means I'm selfish or a psychopath. That's all they have for Hunter. What I learned is that whoever wrote this page thought that adding depth to a trope is somehow a deconstruction, and that they weren't educated on what the tropes of the battle genre were, which should have been clear when they called it shonen. And for the tropes that they do know, they don't know the history of it, leading to them incorrectly assuming that Hunter x Hunter did things that was uncommon. But guess what? If you think Hunter x Hunter is a deconstruction, then you'd also have to agree that MHA is a deconstruction, because MHA is the only other battle manga with its own page. Let's go over that. Here's the intro. My Hero Academia is fond of deconstructing the tropes it utilizes, being a cliché storm, particularly tropes otherwise freely utilized in action-based media. End quote. The story adds depth to bystander syndrome by adding laws that prevent non-heroes from intervening. This only works when you're vague about what genre you're talking about. If we're talking battle manga, they rarely have bystanders. The action in their arcs don't often take place in heavily populated areas. If you're talking about superheroes, bystanders usually don't have powers, which is why they stand by. This isn't a trope in either genre. For Everyone's a Super, I can't speak for comics, but I can for anime. The trope itself barely has any data on anime because it's not common. A lot of the powers being useless is an uncommon idea, but the trope is already uncommon. Powers falling in the wrong hands isn't a subversion. All of these battle manga have villains. Hero with bad publicity is played straight, so how is it a subversion or deconstruction? Intangibility is put in a realistic light, but it's just an ability. Are we really counting this as a point for deconstruction? Does Obito's Kamui also count as a point since it has added details? Should the entire Towaru power system count as a deconstruction? working alone is viewed negatively? Isn't the power of teamwork a common derogatory oversimplification aimed at the genre? Mass superpowering events never existed in the battle genre to my knowledge, and if it did, they definitely weren't common. Twice is another ability subversion. The writer of this page says that characters having one power is played realistically because of all the drawbacks that come along with it. One person, one power was not a common trope back then. Only One Piece really did that. Hunter allows for one Hatsu, but you can still manipulate Nen in different ways. Characters being vulnerable to knives and guns because their powers don't include superhuman physique is kind of different, but not in the way the writer frames it. Most other battle manga don't give their characters superhuman prowess through powers, but through martial arts and training. So the real difference is that a lot of the heroes don't gain superhuman physiques through training. The writer argues that passing the torch is played realistically because it's very stressful. Like I said before, played realistically basically translates to add a bunch of negative consequences and side effects. I'm beginning to think that the people that wrote this page are the type of edgelords that think pessimism and darkness equals maturity and higher quality. There's negativity added to passing the torch, but I also can't think of many other battle manga that pass the torch to begin with. Naruto might be the only one. Personality powers is given additional depth, and this is counted as a deconstruction. Same for superpower genetics. Same for superpower lottery. Talking the monster to death is actually subverted. Training from hell is made negative, so it's a decon. Always in class 1 is made negative, so it's a decon. Ambiguous human has added depth. Abandonment has negativity. I don't understand the point with evil is cool. Stain's actions led to a criminal renaissance. So what does that have to do with messing with a trope? When has a battle manga shown that evil is cool isn't damaging to society, or is helpful to society? Next, villains are broken people who were failed in some way. Seriously? Most of the major Naruto villains, some Black Clover villains, some Fairy Tail villains, Ginjo from Bleach, this is common. Misery builds character is subverted by having misery harm character. I point you to the villains I just listed. Noble Demon is a trope played straight, so what is it doing here? Stronger with age has negativity added. Same for Undying Loyalty. Willfully weak has depth added. Also, none of these three are common tropes in battle manga. So for this section, adding depth or negativity to a trope counts as a deconstruction, and a lot of tropes deconstructed aren't even common in the battle genre. In conclusion, deconstruction, according to TV tropes, amounts to adding layers and depth to a trope or adding negative consequences and drawbacks to a trope, which is defined as putting it in a realistic light. And the writers of these pages don't have a strong enough understanding of the tropes in the battle genre and the history of these tropes to be making these statements. Finally, subverting for fun usually results in robbing the audience of a satisfying payoff for the sake of being different. Here's a question for you. If Hunter x Hunter is a deconstruction, and then several stories copy those deconstructed tropes, are those stories now also deconstructions? Because if that was the case, most post-One Piece battle manga would be deconstructions. You don't know how long I've waited for this. Keep learning, you Barians.